joining me on stage now to do that, I'd like to invite back to the stage actually Jussi Heikkinen, Vice President, Corporate Relations for Nokia Middle East and Africa, and Ben White, the founder of VC for Africa, for our Demo Sage panel. All right, gentlemen, so having seen what we've just seen, as we can work through them in the order that we saw them, some quick thoughts perhaps on Duma, and perhaps you can start with you, Ben. What jumped out at you, and what has caught your eye given your experience at VC for Africa and working with early stage startups?
Well, I think just to start off, I mean, it's just great to finally have entrepreneurs on stage. This is really when the event gets interesting. Of course, being the first entrepreneurs on stage is always the most daunting. So I have utmost respect for the guys that just presented. I think if you look at Duma specifically, it's really interesting that in the last 2 years we've seen multiple ventures look at the jobs market and identify a real business opportunity there. And I think now it's just about execution. If you look at Mkazi, Mpawa, and the work that Duma is doing, they've all got great teams, they're very motivated, they're driven, they see the opportunity. So really now it's just about the execution and to see which approach and which team does the best job. So
I'll turn it over to you for a brief comment. Perhaps what jumped out at you, and maybe something perhaps to do with the business model or something that caught your eye?
Yeah, I was looking at basically three different elements with Duma. Basically the business opportunity, the business model, and then the user experience. But if we look at the business model side, I think it could have been a bit deeper. I think that the guys could have elaborated a bit more. How are they actually going to monetize this? I understand that the idea is to get the revenue streams from the employers, but still, what is actually the opportunity out there? Sort of opening that up a little bit. How large is actually the market here? What is actually the plan to scale this solution out from Kenya? Recruitment is naturally it's a service that is pretty universal and necessarily doesn't need to be that much tied to the local context. So the business model side, I think that could have been elaborated a bit more. Yeah.
Sure. And perhaps if we move to facility, Ben, maybe I'll throw it over to you and ask, in coming out of Egypt and the MENA region, and perhaps looking at the continent or that particular segment, anything that struck you from their launch?
I think that's a venture that very much typifies the kind of thoughtful entrepreneurship that we're seeing from Egypt right now. With very few resources, they've identified a very important need, and I think they're working to address that. And it's something that is not only relevant for Egypt, but I think is applicable to many other African countries. So the innovation that we're seeing coming from the Egyptian space is quite remarkable, and I think it's one example of the many teams that we're seeing coming up right now.
Great. Maybe over to you, Jussi, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that even though I live in Dubai, my Arabic is pretty poor, so I wasn't able to make out too much of the user interface. I think that the need is definitely there. It's a solution that if you look at the Arabic-speaking world, 50 million people, market, great opportunity there as well. Similarly to the first one, I would have liked to see a bit more about actually where the revenue is going to come from, and is it going to be a governmental service, or is it going to be service provided by the hospitals and so forth. But I think that just like Ben said, I think the idea itself is great. It reflects very much the societal need in Egypt at the moment, and I love the idea itself. So similar to Duma, I think that both ideas are great.
Fantastic. And moving on swiftly, if we will, to Sleep Out now. Ben, back to you, if you don't mind. And some thoughts there, the hospitality and tourism industry, and certainly what we've seen out of the US and the PA economy with Airbnb and the likes really disrupting that. What's kind of your take on this African perspective and what Sleep Out's up to?
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 years ago we weren't talking about companies going out to raise a Series A. So I mean, this is really, I think, also shows a bit the state of the ecosystem, and that we actually have companies that are this polished and are ready for serious funding. I think they're looking at a global marketplace, but certainly with a very strong regional presence, and are tapping into that. And I think the numbers show that. So very exciting.
Yeah, really great to see the maturity. I think that's very good. Opportunities naturally great. Middle East and Africa, massive tourism opportunity in this region. There's maybe a bit of a caveat there. One, at least, question in my mind, having lived many years in different parts of Africa, I'm not sure how much actually individual people are willing out to rent their bedrooms and so forth. So I really see that it's more the hotel industry and the bed and breakfast industry that is their target market, but I may be completely wrong. So it's a very new phenomenon to be sharing an apartment or sharing a house and renting out the empty room. I love the social media aspect of really getting out and occupy the empty beds. I think that this sort of new ideas need to use the virality of social networks and to get the message out there. So I think that sense very good, and the scale was great. So I think I loved about this idea was that the guys are already really thinking and executing a regional approach and really scaling the platform to all parts of the continent and Middle East.
And maybe that's their challenge as well, right? Is now moving regionally, how do they ensure that they maintain that level of quality and the level of service that I think they're building a brand around. And I think that's where, now we're in a stage where we're going to see a lot more companies actually try to reach scale. And that's going to be a very interesting time for all of us.
And last but certainly not least, with Zehu, so play on the cloud space and kind of making sense of sometimes how fragmented that can be. So points of interest and feedback?
So maybe you want to start with this one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I love the idea of a cloud aggregator. I love the idea of being able to upload your data via email, via camera, whatever the source then is. So I think the idea itself is, I don't know the industry that well to be able to say that whether there is actually a comparable solution out there, but the idea itself sounds to me pretty fresh, and I'm one of the guys who's batting with a number of cloud storages, so I would love to see something like this coming out. Of course, it's a pity that because the network doesn't work, we can't really see how the user experience is, but based on the photos of the user interfaces, actually it looks very crisp and very clear. So I think that the execution probably is there. We didn't see it now, but it looked that it's there. And it's a great example of an innovation that actually has global scale. So we don't definitely need to restrict ourselves to the continent of Africa, but can take this sort of idea global.
Yeah, I think in a way they almost exemplify sort of the typical startup that we see coming from South Africa. They think global from the beginning. Yeah. They see an opportunity and they just start building for that, and really are not so confined by being South African or being on the African continent. So I think where a lot of the other companies have maybe a local or regional focus, the South African company says, we've got something that immediately has global potential, and so that's always a healthy perspective.
And maybe switching it up to a bit more of maybe constructive feedback or some opportunities for some of the startups. Any gaps that you've seen now in your respective sets of experience that one sentence here could perhaps change their business model or their approach. So anything that jumped out to you from that?
Well, I think generally just getting on a stage like this and actually doing a demo of the product is not an easy thing to do, especially if there are network issues or problems. So I think what we'll see with the teams this afternoon and also tomorrow is that they'll probably be in the back, hacking to make sure that they can actually do the demo, regardless of whether or not there's a connection. So I think that's really important because, if you're not able to show the actual product and how it works and what makes it so interesting, then it's very difficult, obviously, to capitalize on all of the individuals that are in the audience. So I think that's just a general feedback for all of the teams, is to try and figure out, how do we make sure that our presentation is going to get across.
Yeah, just like Ben said, I think it's a pretty challenging spot to be out here and presenting your case. You've been working with it for months and months and months, have not had fresh air for a long time, and then suddenly you need to be starting pitching it. So it's a great challenge for these guys. But a few recommendations what I would have. First really is that at least I really want to see a better analytics of the opportunity itself. So I really want to understand what the market is, where the market is growing, what's the projection for the coming few years, and so forth. So, and what is actually the model that these guys have for actually getting their piece of the pie. So that's something that is really important. And of course, tied to that then is the business model piece itself. So where is actually the money coming from, and how is this business going to be sustainable? So the idea of a social enterprise, I think it's great, but even social enterprises need to be sustainable enterprises. So the money needs to be coming in from somewhere. So that really is the big piece for me.
And perhaps also maybe the matter of user experience and unpacking that.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. So as Ben started the whole discussion with Duma, I think that like the idea really is great. There's a massive opportunity in that space. But like with all of these guys, it's all about execution. It's all about how the guys build the application, how they get it out to the market, how they do the marketing, all these sort of things. So it's a complicated setup of functions that these guys need to be dealing with. But the user experience, of course, is key to be able to attract new faces to using the service. So that's fundamentally important.
Ben, any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm just absolutely excited to be here and to see the entrepreneurs on stage. I think this is remarkable. So I look forward to seeing the next presentations, actually.
All right, a round of applause, please, for my panel here.
Thank you very much.